On a sunny May morning in 2025, President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso walked through the marble corridors of the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City, phone in hand as he discussed preparations for an upcoming African Leaders Summit. The cool air inside contrasted sharply with the heat of Ouagadougou, his home city. His diplomatic aide, Marcel Ouedraogo, approached with a gold envelope, an invitation from Fox News America First Tonight for an exclusive interview on U.S.-Africa economic partnerships. Traoré paused by the 47th floor window, watching the chaos of Fifth Avenue below, and asked who the interviewer would be. Kash Patel, Marcel replied, noting his controversial stance on African leaders. Though wary of Patel's reputation for blunt, often critical commentary, Ibrahim saw a chance to reshape global perceptions of Burkina Faso, a nation striving to rebuild after years of turmoil. "Accept the invitation," he said firmly. 3 days later, the Fox News studios buzzed with activity under bright LED lights and the scent of coffee and makeup. In his dressing room, Patel, graying, sharp-eyed, and ready for confrontation, reviewed pointed questions alongside documents outlining Burkina Faso's struggles. "Let's show these African dictators they can't just come here and act like saints," he muttered to his producer. Across the hall, Ibrahim, in a crisp navy suit and his iconic military beret, prepared calmly. "He may try to provoke you," Marcel warned, "but we are here to show progress, not pick a fight." Ibrahim nodded silently, his expression resolute. He had faced military coups, economic crises, and deep political instability, so a television presenter, no matter how provocative, would not be his greatest obstacle. At 8:45 p.m., the countdown began in the Fox News studio. Cameras rolled, lights intensified, and millions tuned in for what would become one of the most charged interviews on American television. "Good evening, America. I'm Kash Patel, and this is America First Tonight," the host declared with a sharp smile. "Today we have with us Ibrahim Traoré, the young president of Burkina Faso. But can we trust yet another African leader?" The words sliced through the studio, but Ibrahim, seated firmly in a red leather chair, maintained composure despite his clenched hands. "Thank you for having me, Mr. Patel," he said in steady, fluent English. "I am here to talk about the future, not prejudices of the past." Kash leaned forward, pressing, "Prejudices? Mr. Traoré, your country has some of the worst poverty, persistent instability, and now you're here asking for U.S. investment. Why should this time be any different?" Ibrahim recalled the children in newly built schools, hospitals reopened, roads paved, real achievements. "Because unlike many, I don't just talk about change, I implement it," he responded, voice rising. "In 2 years, we've reduced child mortality by 30%, built over 200 schools, and created 50,000 jobs. These are facts." The studio grew tense as technicians exchanged uneasy glances. Then, with a predator's grin, Kash held up a document. "Nice numbers. But here are reports of human rights violations, arbitrary arrests, repression, executions. How do you explain that?" Ibrahim's blood surged. "These are lies," he said, his voice heavy with indignation. "Lies pushed by those who fear a rising Africa. While others sit comfortably and criticize, I'm on the battlefield, fighting terrorists who want to destroy my people." Kash let out a sarcastic laugh. "Terrorists?" he repeated as the showdown intensified. "Or are they just citizens who disagree with your authoritarian policies?" Kash pressed, voice laced with accusation. "Let's be honest. You came to power through a military coup. Does that make you a Democrat?" The studio fell silent as tension spiked. Ibrahim rose slightly from his chair, eyes locked onto Patel, his calm giving way to tightly controlled fury. "Mr. Patel," he said with measured precision, "there's a difference between serious journalism and cheap propaganda. You are crossing that line." At that moment, Kash made the critical mistake that would change the entire dynamic. Leaning back with a smug grin, he deliberately dropped any formality. "You know, Ibrahim, the problem with you Africans is you always play the victim. You come here with your hands out, asking for help, but you can't even manage your own tribes." The word tribes exploded in the studio like a grenade. Ibrahim froze, his jaw tightening, his eyes sharpening like steel. A few gasps escaped from the audience, and Marcel, watching from the wings, buried his face in his hands, knowing the line had been irrevocably crossed. But Kash, arrogantly oblivious, kept going. Maybe it's time you people stop pretending to govern and let serious countries handle real business? The air in the studio turned electric, every camera trained on Ibrahim as the tension teetered on the edge of eruption. After all, how many military coups have you had? It's like watching children playing adults. Kash Patel sneered, his words hanging in the air like a slap. The silence that followed was heavy. Slowly, Ibrahim stood, his 6'2" frame casting a commanding shadow under the harsh studio lights, his hands trembling. Not from fear, but from years of suppressed fury at the arrogance cloaked in Western media respectability. "Mr. Patel," he said, voice low and charged with restrained power, "you've just shown why America is losing influence in the world. It's not our failure, it's your ignorance." Patel fumbled, attempting to backpedal. "Look, I didn't mean to." "No," Ibrahim cut in, stepping forward, eyes locked onto Patel. "You did, and now you're going to hear what a tribal African has to say." Standing just feet from the host's desk, Ibrahim's presence became a force, the cameras capturing the raw dignity and unapologetic defiance radiating from him. "You want to talk tribes? My tribe builds bridges across rivers you've never heard of. They are doctors, saving lives with second-hand equipment, teachers instructing in 4 languages while you cling to one, barely, with a teleprompter." Kash tried to interject, but Ibrahim's voice surged, clear and unstoppable. "My tribe gave you Wangari Maathai, who planted 30 million trees while your corporations leveled forests. It gave you Mandela, who forgave a nation that imprisoned him. It gave you scientists who fought pandemics while you sold weapons." The intensity in his eyes sharpened. "The difference between us, Mr. Patel, is that I speak of my people with love and pride. You speak of yours with fear and disdain." The studio froze. Even the technicians were riveted. Patel, for once, was mute. "You want numbers?" Ibrahim pressed. "We've increased agricultural production by 40%, cut imports by 25%, built West Africa's largest solar reserve. What have you built, besides televised outrage?" And then, with devastating grace, Ibrahim smiled. It wasn't smug, it was sorrowful. "What saddens me, Mr. Patel, is that you waste a platform that could educate millions, to peddle ignorance that tears them apart." Kash Patel, scrambling to regain control, said, "Look, Ibrahim, you're being too emotional. I was just asking questions Americans want answered." That's when it happened. Ibrahim, moved by years of pent-up frustration with Western arrogance, stepped forward, not with violence, but with a presence that radiated centuries of suppressed dignity. "Emotional?" he repeated, voice rising. "Then yes, I am emotionally attached to dignity." And with that came the moment the world would call the diplomatic slap of the 21st century. Not physical, but thunderous. He slammed his open hand on Patel's desk, the sound cracking through the studio. "Enough!" Ibrahim roared. "Enough disrespect, enough ignorance, enough treating African leaders like beggars when we are equal partners." The shock wave was instant. Kash recoiled, the audience murmured. Production control panicked. Yet Ibrahim wasn't done. He turned to the camera, his voice steady and direct. "America, you deserve better journalism. We Africans deserve respect." Chaos erupted backstage as Marcel rushed in. "President, we must leave now," he whispered in French. As Ibrahim calmly walked out, Patel, desperate and humiliated, yelled, "Security!" But the damage was done, not to Ibrahim, but to Kash's image. "I came in peace, and I leave in peace," Ibrahim said, adjusting his suit. "But I exposed your truth." Outside, as New York's breeze met him, Ibrahim looked at the skyline and told Marcel, "Call our lawyers. Insulting a head of state has consequences." 3 days later, at Whitman and Associates on Wall Street, top international attorney Sarah Whitman reviewed footage meticulously. "Aggravated defamation," she concluded. "This is worth $90 million in damages for both moral harm and economic loss." Ibrahim listened, more focused on precedent than compensation. "How often does this happen, Sarah?" he asked. "Many times," she replied, "but never with this kind of legal pushback. You're changing the rules." Meanwhile, across town in Queens, a panicked Kash Patel paced his modest office. "Tony, I'm being crucified," he shouted. "Sponsors are dropping. Social media's exploding." His lawyer, sweating in overwhelm, muttered, "It was just a TV interview." But even he knew it was more than that. It was history. It was then that the phone rang. Jake Morrison from Fox News, his voice tense with panic, delivering news that made Kash Patel's blood run cold. Ibrahim Traoré was taking him to court. 1 week later, the federal court of the Southern District of New York was packed, its neoclassical steps swarming with journalists and TV crews, capturing every moment of a trial that had become a global spectacle. Ibrahim arrived in a sleek black limousine, dressed in a crisp navy suit and his iconic military beret, greeted by a crowd of cheering African immigrants, waving signs reading "African dignity" and "Respect our leaders." Across the square, Kash Patel emerged from a yellow taxi, hunched and evasive, avoiding the cameras that once made him famous. Inside, Judge Margaret Thompson, a no-nonsense black jurist known for her unflinching fairness, presided over the courtroom. Sarah Whitman stood with unwavering confidence and declared, "Your Honor, what occurred on live television was not journalism, but a calculated assault fueled by racism and colonial bias that harmed not just my client, but an entire nation's dignity." Tony Ritchie stammered a weak defense, calling Patel's words legitimate questions. But Judge Thompson interrupted, unimpressed. "I've reviewed the footage. What your client engaged in was not journalism. It was systemic degradation." Then came the ruling that shook the media world, a preliminary injunction prohibiting Patel from making any further public statements about Ibrahim until final judgment. "This case," the judge added, "is bigger than two individuals. It is a reckoning over how media power is used and misused in shaping global narratives." Outside, Ibrahim addressed the press briefly, his words resonating across continents. "This is not just my case. It's the case of every African leader mocked, every African child taught to be ashamed, and every soul who believes dignity has no color, no border." 6 months later, the case was quietly settled. $90 million, the largest defamation settlement involving a foreign head of state in U.S. history, and a nationally televised public apology from Patel. Ibrahim donated the entire sum to create a scholarship fund for exchange programs between African and American universities, turning a moment of confrontation into a legacy of unity and education. In Ouagadougou, a statue now stands in the city square, not to commemorate conflict, but the courage to defend truth, honor, and identity. At its base, a simple inscription reads, "When truth meets courage, justice is born."